But how do you want us to start? You just want us to start?
Keep talking about anything. I'll cut into it, okay?
Let me start.
You start. You know how to do this. I don't do this as often as you.
Welcome to the first post-election edition of Democratic Visions. We're in the BCAT studio November 5th, a little bit after 5 o'clock. Our guests are Tane Danger and Howard Lieberman. As most informed Twin Cityans know, Tane is co-founder of the Theater of Public Policy. He and Brandon Boat help citizens feeling politically isolated and disconnected feel somewhat better. They figured improv comedy would be therapy of some kind. It's been working. Howard Lieberman, from time to time, teams up with author Laura Nemi. Both are superb storytellers on their own, but when they are together on stage or here on Democratic Visions, you get twice the punch for a single ticket. They are Minnesota Prime ruminators. Howard is a retired attorney, but during his New York phase, for a while, he was Norman Mailer's bodyguard. Go figure. A lot has been happening since then. So go for it, boys.
When I first moved to Minnesota, I thought this was a wonderful place. I moved here because I thought it was a politically progressive community. It had a good arts community as an artist, and I like winter.
You lost me on the last one. Keep going.
But as I've gotten older, I like winter less. It's become less progressive. We're becoming redneck. We really are. I didn't know that I would be the only Jew, that I would be the most radical politically, the most outspoken politically. I didn't really understand that most Minnesotans don't understand irony. And the first time I appeared in front of the city council, I used curse words that...
How rude.
Well, that's the reaction I got. Thank you. Who's next? And eventually, I got appointed to chair a public commission in Stillwater. And 22 years later, when I retired, the mayor said, we assume Howard's going to want to make a speech. And we would like the local access cable TV man to put his finger right next to the mute button, because we never know what will come out of Howard's mouth. So the question I have for you,
yes,
can we in Minnesota get back to a position where you not only tolerated, but communed with people on the opposite side of the political aisle, where we had progressive Republicans, we had the DFL, and you'd sit down over a cup of coffee at the local coffee shop. And my local coffee shop is the Daily Grind in downtown Minneapolis, downtown Stillwater, and talk about ideas.
Yeah. I moved here as well from Minnesota, or from elsewhere. I grew up in Florida. And, I have some of the same reactions, but the thing that I really found that I love about Minnesota is that people care about this place, right? Like, they care about it for different reasons and in different ways, but people really believe in, they want to do something here and be connected to here and make this place work in a variety of ways, whatever that means to them, in a way that's different than other places that I visited or lived. I use this example a lot, but my parents live in South Florida. They've been there for 30 years. They're the only people who are on their block who were there when they moved in. Because people kind of come and go, and where they live is a big metropolitan area that people sort of see as sort of a place I'll be for a little while. People in Minnesota, for the most part, whether they're in a city like Minneapolis or St. Paul, or they're in a place like Stillwater, they're out in greater Minnesota, I really believe that they much more often think of this as no, this is home, and I need to do something here. And that means a lot to me, and I think that gets to, hopefully, part of what you're talking about, that idea of can you get people to have those things? I mean, honestly, I think that it's challenging because yes, I think that is true. With my work with the Theater of Public Policy, that was sort of the whole idea of it, is getting people together to actually grapple with and think about ideas. we started a thing called the theater of public policy, not the theater of politics, because I was like, politics is sort of whatever you want it to be. It's sort of ephemeral and not, like, I wanted people to actually grapple with and talk about ideas and substance and things. I do think that it is challenging or hard right now, and I think it's because things are so nationalized and so sort of like blown out to just be about whatever sort of the red team or blue team is doing on a national level, as opposed, like I'm not going to be on camera making a strong case for that we should bring back like earmarks and pork, but I do think that there is something interesting to talk about a time when you were like, well, what did my representative bring back to my district this term, right? Like, did we get a new bridge built or something here?
We did in Stillwater.
You did in Stillwater.
I worked on it for a decade.
Right, but like those are not, for the most part, it doesn't seem to me like the kinds of questions that we're asking. We're not asking a lot of our elected officials or candidates sort of like, what is the thing that you're going to do here, like in our community, that we really need? I think a lot of times, unfortunately, it's like, well, who are you going to vote for Speaker of the House? Or will you support like this other legislation that somebody else is doing? And obviously that stuff is important and it matters, but I do wonder if we lose something by it all just being sort of the national piece, because then it makes it harder.
It's interesting because there's an expression, all politics is local.
Yeah.
Well, I think to some extent that was true. I think you've raised a very good point. I think we're moving away from that. When I first moved here, we talk about local things, whether it was the bridge, love it or hate it, I like it. We talked about, well, I didn't, but people talked about high school football, or they talked about the mayor, and by the way, did you know the mayor is having a dalliance with so-and-so and so-and-so? And
I need to read the Stillwater gossip pages more often.
Oh, there's plenty of gossip. But he's doing a good job. Look at Main Street. Businesses are open. He's doing things for the businesses. But, I mean, we talked about those things.
Yeah.
But now, nobody talks locally. I mean, we have our school board issue that got really rancorous. And we don't need to go into the details. So that was local. But by and large, our reps, our members of Congress, it's all about the national political scene and the national issues. Universal health care. No, we got to do, our thing. We got to do it this way. We got to do that. Who's talking about what's right for Minnesota? And how, again, I'm going to come back to this because I'm fairly short on ideas after being home for the last 9 months. How do we get to a point where we sit down as neighbors? I was walking, I had COVID, so don't come too close. But I had COVID, and I walk a lot. That's my thing, I walk.
That's good.
And I walked through town, and this one woman came running out. She says, "You're Jewish, you're Jewish." I said, "I know." And I said, "I know you know." You know then George Soros and the Jewish money is what's behind all of this COVID.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, she's a little drunk. This is a small town. If I punch her lights out, people will not like that.
No.
And so I stood there while she berated me as a Jew behind the Jewish conspiracy to, to destroy our Lutheran brotherhood, so to speak. And I don't think when I moved here, people would have done that. A neighbor, when I first moved in, brought me a plate of chocolate chip cookies. When someone new moved into that same house, I brought them a plate of chocolate chip cookies, and they couldn't get me out of the house fast enough. Thanks. Yeah. I'm allergic to chocolate. Why don't you just take them back with you, and goodbye. I fear we're at that point, and I don't know how to move beyond that and get back to...
First of all, let me say, I'm very sorry that happened to you with this woman. That is inexcusable. The only piece that I would push back on is the idea that I mean, I know that you're saying, like, for your experience, like, it didn't happen when you were living here 20 years ago. I think that there's a lot of people who would say, like, maybe 50 years ago, it would have happened, like, probably a lot more. And it definitely was happening and probably does happen still to a lot of, like, people of color, I know for a fact, like,
sure.
who go into, like, places and whatnot. To your question, how do we get back to this? I think that there's like two really fundamental questions here. Like, how do we get back to it, and do people want to get back to it? That's the piece that I get more like existentially scared about, because like I can think of lots of ways that we can get people like back together. Again, this is like my life's work, is like giving people things to grapple with ideas and ways to do things, and talking to each other. And I think that there's really good work that's going on around this. And I think it's the positive piece of it is that it is something that every single person can do if they want to, right? Like it is when we're all, I may not be able to get the healthcare bill that I want passed. I may not be able to change how policing happens the way that I want it to, or I may not be able to do agricultural policy the way that I think it should be done. But can I reach out and like build bridges and like connect with people in my community and try and make it stronger? Yes. I have the power to do that, just like every other individual person has the power to do that. I think the more fundamental question is whether people want to do that. That's the piece sometimes, like even looking at my own circle of friends, how many friends do they have who think radically differently than they do, whether politically or sociologically or religiously or whatever it is, right? It's so easy to get very siloed, and to basically create a homogenous group of thinkers. And that is very comfortable, probably, in a lot of cases. I find it very dull, but it's very comfortable, I guess.
If you don't engage with people with whom you disagree, you're never testing what it is you believe.
Right.
And I no offense to you, because I think we're on the same side of the aisle, but talking to people who agree with you all the time is just a waste of time. Sometimes it makes you feel good. You go, okay, I'm not crazy because Dane believes the same thing I believe. Dane's crazy, so what's the point? But the point is really, we've got to find a way to meaningfully engage. And there are places where we must and can agree. But you're right. Do people care? I mean, we're two people sitting here. We're both involved socially, politically.
We're both spending a night on Bloomington television in order to talk about public affairs issues. Like, we are a minority, definitely. Right. We're supposed to be talking about sort of a 2020 postmortem of the election. I think that, and Democrats did not do nearly as well as they thought they were going to do in like House and Senate races. And I do wonder if there's a piece of that where they weren't talking with folks or weren't engaging with folks in a way where it was actually listening to what people wanted to kind of talk about or grapple with, right? Like, is it, we really want to do like a Green New Deal, and we really want to do, Medicare for all or a public option or whatnot. And like, you can absolutely believe that those things are vitally important and very real. I really am a big believer in, we have to listen to like what people are saying. This is what I really want you to do first. And I know that people who are watching this are going to push back and be like, well, even if people don't want us to do something on climate change, we have to, because it's like going to be a crisis. And I totally get that. And I still nonetheless think that if you don't start from a place of listening and like trying to actually hear what people are saying, these are the things that actually really matter to me, and this is what I really care about, and then do the creative work of figuring out how to put that into your political agenda, then you're kind of doomed for failure, I think.
I'll tell you a story that back in 2016, right? Well, actually before the election, I, as a former director of the Irish Arts Center in New York City, we have a reunion every year in upstate New York. And we get out, we play music, we dance, I tell stories, we do stuff. And one of the old fellows, a union guy, he said, Howard, can I talk to you? I said, sure. He said, I can't talk to the rest of those folks. I said, what's that? What do you want to tell me? He said, I'm voting for Donald Trump. And at that point, I could have gotten up and said, oh my God. I could have given him a look like, are you nuts? I said, tell me why.
Yeah.
He said, Donald Trump may be a good man, He may be a bad man. I don't know. But he's talking to and seemingly listening to working people.
Yeah.
He said union men. He said, she doesn't even know that working people exist. And I went, wow. And because I come from a working class and below background. I was visiting with someone in Philadelphia. I'm a legal consultant when I need to pay the bills. And I get to know all the receptionists, all the secretaries, all the staff, all the people in the mail room. And I walk in and Betty, who's probably still the receptionist in this Philadelphia office, said, "Can I speak to you, Howard?" I went, "Uh-oh." I said, "Sure." She said, "I'm a Bernie supporter. But if Bernie doesn't get the nomination, I'm going to support Trump." I said, "Why?" Trump listens to working people. Bernie listens to working people. She doesn't even know we exist. So that is to support your point. You know, when you're elected to office, and even though I was in only Stillwater office, you begin to think your ideas are really important and you need to lead those people to the right answer. But what we failed to do sometimes when you're in office or whatever, when you're running television cameras, is you forget to listen. You forget what really matters to people.
Right.
And you know, we have an election right now, and as we film this, we don't know who's going to win this election. It's kind of this and this. I think this side's going to win. Oh, that's my left hand. But we don't know. What we do know is it's very close. And we also know that it does not appear necessarily that either side is actually listening to their base. Although Donald Trump, what he does exceptionally well, is he creates the illusion of caring and listening to his base. And he says, "I'm with you. I care about this issue. I hate immigrants. I don't like LGBT people. We ought to go back to different values. We ought to do that. I hear you, and I'm on your side." And that's what has made him so compelling to so many people. And I think that's your point. If we're going to get up to a place where we can talk across the void, it's because we are listening as well as talking.
Yeah, I 100% think that that's right. I think that one of the things that complicates it, after I've made the point of how important listening is you know, who we're listening to. And, you know, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, like, one of the, again, we're so siloed. So I can be listening all day, but if everybody who's around me basically kind of is parroting the same types of things, then I'm going to think, oh, well, that's representative of, like, what everybody thinks.
You know, and this whole notion of listening and bridging the gulf between people, I like your idea of asking the secondary question, which is why. I don't think enough people think that deeply about the positions they hold. Mm-hmm. You know, if you say to someone, "Okay, you believe that abortion is wrong." "Okay, tell me why." "Well, life begins at conception, or begins when God does whatever God does, or whatever. So you're going to tell me then that you're pro-life?" "Well, absolutely I'm pro-life." "Well, how do you feel then about immigrant children, infants, being torn from their parents, their mothers, while they're still breastfeeding and put in cages? How is that consistent with a pro-life position? Do you believe in the death penalty? And how is that consistent?" But nobody wants to, you know, that's all that left-wing stuff you're getting into. Abortion is murder, and murder is wrong. And if you can't understand that, then there's no way to talk.
See, I know that there's a lot of folks who I've gotten to, you know, points with in that kind of thing. I don't know, like, I think that we have a lot of crises in this country. I'm going to suggest that one crisis we have is a lack of, like, curiosity in each other, right? Like, and I get it. Like, we are scared people, and a lot of people have good reason to be scared and frightened for a wide variety of reasons. And yet, in thinking about like how we do better, how we kind of work together, I think that the only way that I see through it is for people to become more genuinely like curious about each other and about how people think and why they think these different things. I think that this shows up on the left and the right, but that there are these places where it gets to be not that, oh, I think that you're wrong, and like I'm going to tell you that you're wrong, but rather even having this conversation is wrong, right? Like even like talking about this issue is fundamentally flawed because I'm giving credence to the opinion that you have. Which is so, and you know, like we just lived through this election where a lot of people said, well, you shouldn't even like have Donald Trump at a debate because even just like giving his beliefs sort of like a platform is poisonous and awful for a wide variety of things. I completely understand that. There are probably days of the week where you could convince me of that. And I also don't know what the alternative is other than actually getting in and grappling with the things that he says or with that anybody else says and trying to figure them out and then figure out why so many people sort of are into them and buy them. Because to me, again, like it's either that you're going to do this in sort of an intellectual, democratic, like thoughtful way, or you're going to do it in a physical, violent way, and that is not in anywhere I'm ready to go because I don't know what the space between those two things are.
Well, I worry about that because when I was a younger man living in Vermont, hanging around with Bernie Sanders and those folks, and something called Free Vermont, people talked about revolution. We owned guns. The FBI invaded our house looking for Bernadine Dorn.
Really? Were you in the Weather Underground?
I knew.
Are you not allowed to say that on camera? Like,
and in the event, I never. There's a French filmmaker. He's actually American, but he's best known in France. He's dead now. His name is Robert Kramer, and Robert Kramer made a variety of films, and he became very well known in France. One of his movies, and we lived together, one of his movies was Ice 9.
Oh, yeah.
And the concept behind it was you create the conditions that force people to take sides and you bring about revolution. You force revolution and people will take sides and hopefully they take the correct side. And I'm thinking, I don't like that. I believe in engaging in dialogue.
Yeah.
And building consensus, even if the consensus is not everything I wanted.
Right.
And so I don't want chaos. I don't want to tear everything down. And I don't believe that the majority of people on the other side of that aisle do. But I don't know how to reach out and say, let's talk. Let's talk. You can hate some of my ideas.
Yeah.
I can hate some of your ideas, but there's a lot about which we can agree. And is that so bad?
What I would say, I take energy and strength and inspiration from our people of color who have basically, you know, been doing this work in like, just like they had no choice but to like do it and then figure out how to heal on their own for so long that I'm often like, when I'm like, oh, how can I possibly go on? I'm like, oh, like, you know, there's generations upon generations of Black and Indigenous and people of color who, like, they didn't even get to ask that question.
That's right.
Yeah, so I should stop my whining and just keep putting one foot in front of the other as best I can.
Yeah, but it's okay to whine.
It is okay, yeah. What are we going to do if we're not whining once in a while?
I'm Jewish. We whine.
Yeah.
And then we eat.
Yeah.
And so.
Oh, I grew up in South Florida. Like, you know, I basically, if I hadn't been like a Minnesota transplant to South Florida, probably would have converted.
Eat a bagel. Put something on the. No, don't put something on the bagel for God's sake.
Yeah.
Don't, what is that? What are you looking at? What is that? Put some cream cheese on there. Get some fish on there. Get an onion, slice a tomato. Now eat. Look at you, you're skin and bone.
It's so funny you bring it. So when my parents, because they were from here originally, and they moved to South Florida when I was like a baby, and they were very in that Minnesota mindset that you talked about, where people don't like come and knock on your door. And so they tell this story of like the first time like somebody like in the neighborhood was like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And they're like, "Oh, well, we're new. You should come over." And then they did, and my parents were shocked. They were like, "What? We didn't think you would actually come." It is very different culturally that way.
Right.
You're the lawyer in the room, and I'm kind of surprised that you aren't at a Pennsylvania courthouse right now. But every other lawyer in the country is. So
With their hand out.
Yeah, exactly.
Waiting to get paid. The bottom line is there are going to be lawsuits. The lawsuits probably will not prevail. If there are 10,000 ballots in question, but you're behind by 35,000, the judge will say, even if you win, and you get all 10,000 votes, which you probably won't, but let's assume you do, you're still going to lose. And we're not going to waste the court's time litigating this. And I think most of these lawsuits are merely a way of fostering chaos.
yeah.
And that's what that candidate prefers. Anyway, we're starting to run out of time. We didn't, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just, well, we didn't talk about, this whole thing was meant to be an election recap, which we didn't do. But I like this conversation. I really want to make the point, because I fundamentally believe this. People are struggling for like, how do I make a difference? How do I change things? How do I make things better? And people want to do something huge. They want to have a revolution. They want to like overthrow the system or whatnot. And I fundamentally believe that it starts with people actually like going out and talking to each other and having literally the most basic conversations with other folks. And I get that it's hard. And I think that it's particularly hard here sometimes in the Midwest, in Minnesota, where we're very reserved. As you said, people, you knock on their door and they say, "What are you doing here?" as opposed to "welcome in." But I think that it's work. It's hard, but I believe it's our job to try and find those places and not just find opportunities to tell other people about what we think, but listen to other people, spend time with someone who is thinking differently than we are, and figure out as best we can why they think those things.
My last thought is I have what's called the 99-man rule. It's gender specific. I apologize.
About to say, but yeah.
If there are 99 people in a room and 98 believe one way and one person believes the other way, you have to listen to that person, because A, you're going to say, wow, there's something there I really need to think about, and you may change what you believe. You may listen and say, nah, I gave it a good hearing. It strengthens what you believe.
Yeah.
If you don't listen to the other person, the 99th person, then we'll never cross that gap.
Democratic Visions is handcrafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington. Watch us on select cable systems and on our YouTube channel. This is Carol Sundstrom.